Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine and I have a geometry lesson to share with you today. This one's a fun one. We're using our Live Education Waldorf main lesson block for geometry, and today we're going to do 16 division of a circle. For this project, I have our main lesson book. These books are 9.5 inches by 12.5 inches, and they have blank pages on both sides separated by an onion skin. I'm going to start off by measuring a circle that is approximately 9 centimeters. You can find all of the details down in the description box below. Unlike other projects where I want to maximize the size of the page, for these ones, I want to make it small enough that we can construct our floral or leaf design within the circle without it being too big. We're going to be doing 16 division of a circle, and you're going to start with your circle. Make sure you mark your center before you complete your circle. Then you're going to connect the point above and below your center using a straight edge. And you can eyeball this one because if it goes through the center, you know that it's going to be the diameter. Next, you're going to take your compass and make it larger than the circle. So you're extending your compass so that it's larger than your original radius. And from the bottom point, you're going to swing an arc on either side of your circle. You're going to reset your compass to your top point. And again, swing your arc on either side of the circle. And this way, you're going to have the arcs cross each other, and at that point you can then lay your straight edge across your circle, making sure you go through the center, and then you can mark on the circumference both sides. We're going to end up using the straight edge to create lines on each of these points, but right now I'm just marking these 4 divisions on the outside of the circle, which if you connected them, you would make the perfect square, which we have done previously in our lessons. But if you haven't done that lesson, then I do recommend that you begin with that one first. Now we're going to connect the top point with the bottom point, making sure to go through the center. And so we have our first diameter line. Now we're going to cross that with our other 2 points, giving us a perfect right angle right at the center of the circle. Now that we have divided our circle into 4 equal parts, it's time to bisect each of those angles. We want to reposition our radius back to the original size of the circle. So do be as precise as you can for this. I'm just going to double check that the arc is correct by swinging it around the original circle. And then if it matches up, then I know that I'm ready to go. Once I am certain that it is the same radius, I'm going to take the point of my compass, put it on that far right point, swing my arc out into the page, then reposition my compass back at the top point, and both of those arcs should bisect. And at that point, you can connect that point with your center, and then you can draw a line from that part of the circle all the way down to the bottom. So you don't need to go all the way out to the arc outside of the circle. So now we're going to do the same thing on the other side, swinging an arc from both points, making sure that it does cross, and that way we can then connect that point down to the center. And you don't need to do the bottom 2. I started to do that one, and I realized, well, actually, I don't need to do that, because if you get one, you can just do the upper hemisphere of your circle, and then it will just connect to the lower part. And you also want to make sure that you're going right through the center point. So now we have our 8 division of a circle. Now it's time to bisect each of those angles. Once again, we're going to take the point of our compass and we're going to make an arc from the top point and then the adjacent point. And they should cross outside of the circle. And then you can go ahead and connect those 2 points, the point outside the circle with the center, and then you can draw your line right through your circle. So now we just need to do this on the upper hemisphere because it will be the same below. And at least 2 of these arcs are within my paper, but 2 arcs are not. And I run into a little bit of a challenge in figuring that out, and I do have to eyeball it just a little bit. You can solve this by working with a smaller radius to begin with or a larger piece of paper, but I think a smaller radius would be sufficient. So now it's time to do these last 2 divisions, and and I can get one arc, not quite, trying for the second arc, and it's just a little bit off the paper. So I'm going to try the lower side and see if I can get that one, and no, it's just off the paper. It's right across the center divide, and I'm going to try to do this, but when I lay down the straight edge, it does bubble up over that center piece. But I'm going to try it anyway. And there are a couple of tricks to work around this if necessary, and one of them is just simply using a protractor and divide up the circle from the center, but we are trying to use our compass as part of this project, and just looking at it, I can tell that that section was wrong. And you could just forego that and say that it's good enough, but because we're working with something that's so precise and so specific and working with our geometry, we do want it to look as correct as possible, and our eyes can really tell even a subtle deviation. Our eyes are really good at being able to tell if it is correct or not. So I'm doing it again, but I'm actually just sort of eyeballing it, because every time I put my pencil down on that point outside of the circle, it just doesn't line up properly, and that's just because of the variation in the page thickness and of course going through that center divide. So when I've done my second drawing right through the center, it looks good enough for me, and now we just have to do our last section here. And again, it's going to be a little bit troublesome trying to get that arc because it just goes off the page just a little bit. But now I realize that part of me drawing this line is just going to be to eyeball it a little bit. So if you're working with your students, I would just recommend to use a smaller radius to begin with so that you can avoid that issue. And honestly, it actually makes drawing your image within that circle a lot easier when it is smaller. Not too small, but a little bit smaller. It is a little bit easier to work with. Now I want to erase any of those extra lines outside of the circle. They are no longer necessary, and I'm going to just spend some time cleaning up the outside of my circle and the page so that we can get ready for doing the illustration within the center of the circle. I do have some color pencils for this project, although that is optional. I think it looks really beautiful as a pencil drawing. I do erase the edges and misnumber them because the main lesson book recommends that we number them 0 to 8 on either side before constructing our water lily. And then my water lily still has obstructed those numbers, so I erased them one more time and I put them a little bit closer to the circumference of the circle. And then I spent a little bit of time trying to get the shape of the water lily just so there is a very specific shape that you're looking for. And when looking online at different images, I found that there was quite a variety of shapes and sizes, but they all held a certain formation that is the 16th division of a circle. I am using some color pencils here just to add some shading, bringing out those divisions right at the center of the water lily. And I really like the way this lesson turned out. I think when you add a little bit of color and you add a little bit of organic design to your geometry, it really brings the lesson to life. I'm adding a little bit of shading and some dimension with my Lyra Colored Pencils just to bring this image to life. I love the final look of this project. I'm really loving the Waldorf approach to geometry tremendously. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson too. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video for more information and tutorials, as well as links to all of the resources that we've used for our math and geometry main lesson blocks. You can find that link to the blog post down in the description box below. And if you'd like to see how we're homeschooling on a daily basis, you can find me on Instagram and now on TikTok at Pepper and Pine.